Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins, and welcome to Financial Lovemaking, where we talk about love, life, money, and everything in between. I am here with my buddy, partner, and co-host, Ebony Magazine Entertainment Director, Miss S. Tia Brown. How you doing today, Tia?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really well, really well. Happy, smiling. Not as happy as you.
Listen, I try to keep it light. A lot of my favorite reality shows are back on air.
Oh Lord.
Real Housewives of Atlanta, Millionaire Matchmaker, and Love and Hip Hop.
Oh Lord. Oh, what's going on in Love and Hip Hop?
Okay.
What ratchetry are we discussing this week from Love and Hip Hop?
A new season of Love and Hip Hop debuted. It's in New York, and I think one of the biggest storylines this season is that of Yandy Smith and Mendeecees Harris. Now, Yandy is a music executive who's been dating and has a child with Mendeecees Harris, who openly admitted that he used to hustle in the past, and now he's in the record business as well. But he also spent the last about 15 months in prison. Now, of course, reality TV is filmed a few months ago in the past, so he spent a little bit over a year in prison. And when we catch up with him, he's out of jail, and him and Yandy are planning the next steps forward as a family. Here's the thing: he's out on bail. Mendeecees is facing possibly 20 years in prison for drug trafficking charges. Apparently, he allegedly is linked to a big drug tunnel between like New York and Rochester. They're saying more than $2.5 million of weight was moved in his circuit between, I think, like 2005 and 2012. Now, again, these are all alleged. But I was really shocked watching the show, seeing, number one, they threw like this huge party for Mendeecees when he came home from prison, and that's something that is always controversial. We celebrate people coming home in the same manner that we celebrate graduations and weddings. And it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you want to make someone's transition back into society welcoming and warm. But on the other hand, you don't want to celebrate someone's, I don't want to say failure, but poor choices with a huge party. The second thing is in the episode, we see that the couple is considering moving forward with marriage, and then there's a teaser saying that they have another baby on the way. Now, under normal circumstances, this would be great, but the bottom line is that Mendeecees is out on bail. When his case moves forward, who knows if he'll be able to be at home and in the household with their child and their upcoming child, right? That's the child that they're expecting. So just the fact that the couple is considering having another child and getting married when they don't know his fate, to most people, including myself, is just mind-blowing. So financially, she won't have a partner. Emotionally, she won't have a partner that's in home. He's going through his own stress, dealing with the case and possibly being in prison. And, physically, there's no one there to spend time with the children.
That's interesting you say that. First and foremost, I would say that I don't think that we're here trying to put, say, a stigma on those who go to prisons, especially when we talk about drug crimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because just like when I worked on the thing last year, when Russell Simmons and I were trying to work on this drug issue, I did research on it, and my conclusion is that we over sentence in the drug area in the United States. It's a big problem. I don't personally see the same stigma for a drug crime as I do for like rape or murder or something that's really directly harmful to other people. Now, mind you, though, of course, we know drugs are not healthy or good for a community.
Right.
But I see it in a different light. But at the same time, if you want to talk about this issue with the party, the idea of celebrating somebody coming home from jail as if they came home from college, or if they're starting college or came home from war or something like that. That is a little bit strange. On one hand, I think it's important to make people feel loved, and when somebody comes home, you're happy. But after the party's over, are you truly getting to work to build the life that you want to live? To build a better life, or are you somehow inadvertently enabling this, by removing even the healthy part of the stigma? Because sometimes if you're a little bit stigmatized for something you do, it makes you straighten up. right? That's what makes a community work, is that when somebody does something that's not beneficial to the family or the community, other people kind of, say, hey, you can't do that, right? So we're not going to reward that, right? So to some extent, a party definitely removes any stigma, negative or positive. And so the question is, after the party's over, are you still, sort of going, seeping back into a similar lifestyle, similar choices, without any sort of accountability? The way I see it is, if I'm going to celebrate you coming home from jail, I'm also going to hold you accountable for the way you behave when you're not in jail, right? You can't just reward without sort of giving that other kind of reinforcement for certain kinds of choices and behavior. Now, with that said, though, in terms of her choice with this marriage thing, I think from a financial lovemaking standpoint, I can't necessarily see the logic of making this sort of serious long-term commitment with somebody who's got so many issues up in the air. Now, he says he used to be a hustler in the past. If he's on trial right now, I don't know how far in the past are we really talking about. I mean, we're not talking about 10, 15, 20 years. We're talking about things that probably happened in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, whatever, right? So the question is it really in the past? You don't know. I mean, people are very remorseful when they are about to be penalized for something that they've done, when they're about to go before the judge. You ever see that in people in court when they're, the most hardened thugs in the world will be in court like, I'm so sorry, Your Honor, I'll never do this again. And they end up looking very, meek and humble, as if they'll never do anything wrong. But then the confidence may come back out once they're back in their old element or out of that situation, right? So I would say that if I'm trying to consider forming a long-term partnership with this guy, which that's what it is, right? Marriage is just like starting a business with somebody or something like that. The $1 million question is this going to be a good partner for you? Is this somebody that you want to make a long-term investment in? And if you think about it, just think about the way corporations make decisions, or the way an NBA team might decide if they're going to sign a player to a 20-year or 10-year deal or 5-year contract or whatever. They're going to look at not just how good the player is, they're going to look at the future prospects of the player. If the player is facing a potential 20 years in prison, that's a risk, right? So if I've got a child with this man and I'm thinking about locking my life in with this man, understand that you're signing him on for a job that he may not be able to do. And you won't be able to sign anybody else to that job. So maybe this isn't the time to make that long-term commitment. Here's another thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, but this is maybe advice for young women to kind of understand, is that a lot of times when guys are going through hard situations, they become more romantic, more loyal. You know what I mean? When they don't have any options. In fact, I've heard women say that sometimes guys that they will, when they're dating guys that are in jail, those are the most loyal men ever, because they don't have the same options they might have when they're out of jail. And I've literally seen cases where the guy is the most loving partner in the world while he's locked up, and then when he gets out, the tables kind of flip a little bit. So, I'm not saying this is what's going on with him, but I definitely think, it's nice he wants to be romantic, he wants to do the right thing, but at the same time, he didn't do the right thing, before when he had his freedom. So how do you evaluate his capacity to do the right thing now that he's potentially going to be incarcerated for, the remainder of his young life?
All right. One of the things that I think is interesting is how we glamorize certain things about life. Apollo Nita from Real Housewives of Atlanta said something, people crank on Apollo all the time, but he's brutally honest. He said, when I get out of prison, I don't want to come home to nothing, right? So we become so attached to these materialistic things. And when I saw the party scene, to me, it just perpetuated the whole, the superficiality that supports negative things, right? So, you come home, you have this over-the-top party, you're traveling, you're doing this. How can you afford to do these things? How can you afford to do these things? And I think one of the things we don't talk about is the pressure that it puts on men. So love doesn't necessarily look like a fancy dress, a big party, a big car, a trip. It's really about the stable day-to-day decisions that we do to make sure that we can be there in the long term. And that to me is what was most disappointing about seeing the party scene and seeing the traveling on the episode, because it perpetuates this unrealistic expectation in our culture that in order to be happy, in order to be successful, in order to be fabulous, you have to have tons of money, and we don't care how you get it.
Well,
It's a lot of pressure on men. In terms of what you said about relationships, I think you're absolutely right. No one can tell someone else what's best for them, but you really have to do a cost benefit analysis when you're thinking about, when I'm partnering with someone whose future is very unclear, is very unstable, not even just if he goes to prison, but how he will create a future if he's out of prison. Because he's admitted to spending a great deal of time doing illegal activity. And he also said that he's transitioned to the record industry, but we know that that's also a very shaky ground, right? So it's a very unfair burden, I think, to put on a person to say, now, in addition to planning your financial life, you have to plan a marriage and how you're supporting an additional child. I think it's a very crazy scenario. And the last thing I'll say is, we also perpetuate this ride or die lifestyle for women. I'm with my guy, high or low, whatever decision he makes, I'm there with him. And I am a big supporter of loyalty. But I also think we have to think about the decisions that a person makes and how they benefit themselves and how they benefit others. And if a person isn't making healthy decisions for themselves, regardless of how good it feels in the moment, we know what's right or wrong, how can you entrust that they'll make good decisions for you? And that should really determine who you're kind of latching your, what they call it, latching your saddle to in the big picture. Who are we ride or die for?
Well,
Why ride or die for that person?
well, it's funny.
Love isn't always enough.
Well, I agree. And I think that when you talk about the ride or die thing, I would distinguish, the ride or die girlfriend who's been dating the guy for 2 or 3 years, maybe has a baby with him, versus, say, the ride or die attitude that you saw with Camille Cosby, with her husband going up against all these, these rape allegations, which are really disturbing. When I look at Camille Cosby, I see a woman who's married to a man, first of all, a man who's done a lot of things for her, who she's had numerous children with, and she made a vow before God and the state and the world to be with him till death do them part. Some people take that seriously. I don't blame them when they do. But, if you're his girlfriend, you haven't made all those vows. You haven't put in that 50 years. And I think that there might be ways, if I'm a young woman and I'm in the situation that this woman is that you describe, you watch the shows more than I do, but from the way you've described it to me, it almost sounds like she could just say to him, look, I'm going to be here for you, but I may not be here as your wife. I can't be here as your wife unless certain things are in place that will ensure that our family is going to be intact. And in order for our family to be intact, you have to be here. I can't save a seat for you that you're not going to occupy.
Stream of income. I need to know that you're committed to making positive, healthy choices for your future and our family's future.
Right.
It's interesting. I understand what you're saying about Camille Cosby. I don't differentiate the two as significantly. And I definitely respect the history that she's had with her husband. But I do think that each situation has to be evaluated differently, and they're very complicated. People gave Phaedra a lot of flack for leaving Apollo Nita when he was facing jail, and they were married.
Well, let's stick to Phaedra for a minute. I'm not going to say that I know anything about their relationship, but I'm going to say this. Based on what I've seen and heard from each of them, I'm actually more impressed with Apollo than I am with Phaedra, and that's actually flipped from what I felt before. When it first happened, I had big problems with Apollo for his choices, and I still do. I don't think his choices were good, but I didn't like Apollo, and I felt bad for Phaedra. But here's the part I think that bothered me the most when I heard one of Apollo's interviews. It is the fact that if it's true, he says that Phaedra is not allowing him to see his own children. That to me is one of the worst crimes against humanity you can ever commit. Anybody who can imagine having your children taken from you because the person that you have the children with feels that you're a bad person, or because they don't approve of you, that is a fate worse than death. I mean, seriously.
People allow him to see the children. This was when he was out of prison, or why?
No. He says that since he's been in his little situation, he hasn't been allowed to see his kids. And again, I'm not going to say I don't know. Again, I'm not in their relationship.
But I'm saying, like, he's in prison now. This is she hasn't taken them to prison to see the children.
Right. But yeah, basically, he's saying that she's not letting him see his boy,
not bringing them to the prison to see their dad.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Which I want to clarify that, because there's something very different in saying you can't come visit your child, or I won't meet with you, versus I do not feel comfortable bringing a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old to a prison to come see you.
Then let somebody else bring them. Those are his kids. Those are his. I don't care if I'm in the bottom of the worst dungeon. I don't care if I'm in the pits of hell. You better bring my kids to see me. If seriously, I mean,
I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't know what Phaedra's motives are for not doing it, because it can be from many different places. However, we do have to consider the children's own mental health in this. That can be a very traumatizing experience.
There's nothing I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna say there's nothing traumatizing about going to a prison, but I can say this. I know a young woman whose father has been in prison her entire life, and from the time she was little, her mother always said, one, you're going to respect your dad. Even if I don't like him, you're going to respect him. Number two, you better send him a Christmas card. You're going to talk to him, and we are going to go visit him. And even though she didn't like going to prison, and she would cry when her father had to go, and it was very sad for her, she's very happy to this day that her mother kept her father alive in her life.
Right, but that's one person's experience. I am not for or against Phaedra's choice, but I do understand that there are other things to consider. So while this might have been a great experience for this girl, in some ways, you just admitted, she said that she used to cry all the time. I've heard Phaedra publicly say that she does not want her children to think that it's acceptable for men to make bad decisions and be in prison. Right or wrong, there are many variables.
I'm sorry. I think if the roles were reversed and Phaedra had gone to prison, I would think it would be absolutely appalling for him to say, you can't see your mother, because I'm deciding now, even like I made the babies by myself, I'm deciding that your mother's it's just not good for you to go to the place where your mother's going to be for the next 8 years.
I think that there is a double standard for a lot of things. So I'm not going to say it's not true that people feel differently about mothers. It's not. But I would also say, depending on the situation, I could understand that father's perspective as well. The other thing that I want to remind folks is that prisons get put on lockdown. And that is a very, very potentially dangerous and traumatizing situation for all parties involved. So I don't want to make it seem like going to visit prison is like going to see someone, and they're in detention. It has the potential to be a very devastating event. That said,
but I mean, it's also, going out, living as a black man in this world can be devastating. There's a kid, an honor student the other day, who was shot by a mugger randomly trying to defend his brother from the mugger. I mean, and his mother protected him as much as she could. She didn't even let her boys go outside for years because she was worried about the violence in Chicago. She finally lets them go out. One of them gets murdered. Right. So to me, it's like, there are so many variables. I think about Apollo as the father of 2 boys. There are so many things in this world that can get a black man killed. So many things. Not just the cops. That's one thing. There are a lot of black men that will kill you too. And when you don't have a father to guide you through this, to protect you and to teach you how to deal with this, you are lost. I mean, if a lot of women that might complain about these little, these man boys out here, these men that never learned how to grow up, never learned how to be men. A lot of times it's because somebody decided early that their father didn't need to be in their life. They decided unilaterally, as if they made the baby by themselves, that the father doesn't need to be around. In my opinion is this: if you decide to have a child with another person, they have 50% equity in that child and in the choices that relate to that child. So if that person is locked away and you made a baby with that child, they have some say, in my opinion, to say, look, I know it's sad for the child. It could be a little traumatizing. It could be a little upsetting, but I want them to see me too. Right.
So my thing is, it's very hard to determine what's in the child's best interest, and I do not think that let me finish, alone has the ability to do that, or the custodial parent has the ability to do that. However, I do want to make it clear that we can't assume just because someone, a person parented a child, whether it's the mother or the father, that they're going to instill positive things in them regardless of the situation. And just hearing some of the things and some of the values that Apollo has publicly said, to me, that is very concerning.
Well, I mean, but what about Phaedra? I mean, people have written.
You're right. It doesn't mean that Phaedra is the most pious, proper person.
She ain't. We know that, right? We know Phaedra is not a perfect person, right? But it's interesting because, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you want to argue the debate whether or not Apollo's the bad guy, yes, he is. He's the one in prison. You know, there's no way around that. But you know, this sort of idea that I, as one parent, have the right to make decisions about this child's life that, you know, by myself. I think that's kind of crazy. If she decides, if she decides to put him.
This is not really about I as one parent. What this is really about is the woman having more equity in the child than the man.
It could be the woman, but I'm talking about really the custodial parent.
Okay.
You know, like the custodial parent can.
I feel a little bit of sexism.
No. It's not a male female thing. It's not a gender thing. It's a power thing. It's really the idea that says, if I decide I want to move my child from California to Alaska, even though it could be traumatizing, I get the right as a custodial parent to make that decision. If I want to move them from a good school to a crappy school, I get to do that without being judged, without having anybody take my child from me because I decided to put my child in a different school where the bullies may decide to beat him up or whatever. But yet, at the same time, when you talk about the non-custodial parent, it's like if they make a decision, or if they have even if they're in a relationship that the custodial parent doesn't approve of, they then get to say, well, I'm not sending my baby over to your house because I don't like that new person you're dating, and I don't know where they've been. I don't know who they are. But yet you got some dude up in your bedroom, that hasn't been vetted at all. Right? It may sound sexist, and fine. I mean, if we want to throw the gender thing, we know what the standard is, right? We know typically the mother is the custodial parent, and I think the mother has a lot of power in the life of a child, deservedly so. I think the motherhood is actually the most important job in the universe. If mothers stop doing their jobs, the world will fall apart. We agree on that. But I think with that power comes a certain degree of responsibility to understand that you didn't make the baby by yourself. So with Phaedra and Apollo, and I didn't mean to, it's so funny we're off on this tangent. But I would just speak on behalf of the brother and just say that again, based on my instincts from listening to him and listening to her, I don't even watch the show. I
watched the show, and I will say this: based on seeing both of their behaviors, I don't think that it's all right to separate a parent from their child. But I also understand that some things people have to grow to become more comfortable with, and that is a decision that the primary custodial parent ultimately has the power in. If you want to be able to have full access to your child, make decisions that don't prohibit that. And the best thing a person can do is, if you want to put the child first, make sure your behavior exhibits that as a priority. Work on having a better relationship with the parent, with the co-parent, so that you can begin to co-parent from a positive perspective. If you really want to see your son slandering your estranged wife, isn't going to be helpful.
Well, but at the same time they slander each other. That's the way I kind of see it. But and also understand this too. There are a lot of men who've gone to prison, and women too, who've gone to prison trying to provide for their children. Right? So, we can't always assume that every time somebody goes to jail that it's because they're a bad person. What I think about, because you think about even on the female side, when you see all these women that are in jail for drug-related crimes because they did something for the person they loved, or they sold something because they had to feed their babies. I don't see that in the same vein as somebody going to prison for rape or murder or terrible
crime. Let's take the macro and make it the micro, right? So in this specific situation, we hear Apollo talking about he likes to live the fast life. He wants to spend $5,000 a night at a club. He likes having the big car, the fancy clothes. He doesn't want to come home to nothing. This doesn't make him a bad person. This just means that he made some bad choices. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve to see his kids. What I'm saying is, how do we create resolution? Work on developing a relationship that is respectful, so you can co-parent together and get to a point where both of your needs are met fairly. You know, when people are emotional, they do selfish things on both sides. So I'm not going to try to paint Phaedra as a saint and Apollo as the villain. I don't think either one of them is totally one thing or the other. But if the kids are the priority, you have to exhibit maturity. And both of them hopefully will grow to be able to work collaboratively for what's truly best for their sons.
I agree. Maturity definitely goes both ways.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that she needs to make sure yes, well, in this case it's a she, right? She needs to make sure that that father is a priority in those kids' lives, because understand this. If people don't understand what I'm talking about, go look up the word infanticide, and what you'll find is that throughout the animal kingdom,
Oh Lord,
there is seriously, there is no other man will love your children the way the biological father will. You invite other men into that house, there is a very high likelihood of some form of abuse. Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes someone gets killed. Sometimes someone gets beaten or molested. But at the very least, there is a lack of love there that, in many cases, that does not exist if you're talking about biological father to biological son.
So we need to be very clear on this. We don't want to go to the extreme and say that all stepdads or potential stepfathers
not all stepdads. No,
abusive. I think the biggest thing is that we want to encourage parents, whether or not they're estranged because their relationship didn't work or because of distance or whatever, to put their children first.
Yes.
And go beyond your ego and your needs and start planning and making goals that are helpful and beneficial to the child. So I absolutely agree with you. I think every child needs their father, and women cannot be should not be naive into thinking that any man in the child's life will do. There is a special bond and connection between a child and their father. However, we want to make sure that there's more good done than harm. And
absolutely.
That's something that only the parents can determine collaboratively. It can't be a unilateral decision because innately we're selfish. We want what we want. Our disappointments, our hurts guide our decisions. And it's very hard to be selfless when it comes to child. But that is really the highest standard of being a good parent, making selfless decisions.
I don't disagree with that.
Thank you.
So let's just hope that Phaedra keeps those boys in the life of their dad. If you have a willing dad, now if you got a dad that runs off and says I don't want nothing to do with them, that's one thing. But a dad who's not perfect, who makes mistakes, even big ones, if he still loves his kids, those are his kids. Make it work, and I hope he goes to court. I hope that the courts give him some sort of support on this. I don't think inmates typically have very many rights, but I think that because I have seen so many kids whose lives were ruined when their custodial parent decided, oh, I'm just going to switch men, so that means you're going to switch dads.
Right.
Many of these kids end up in situations that would have been that were very, very harmful.
Right.
And I won't go into the details, but some of them were actually tragic. But anyway, okay, enough of that.
So
we so went off on a tangent.
So we talked about Love and Hip Hop. Yandy and Mendici deciding to get married. We were left on a cliffhanger. Not sure how that's going. We do know that they're having a kid. What do you think? Should you marry someone who's potentially facing 2 decades in prison? Let us know your thoughts. Also, let us know your thoughts on Phaedra and Apollo from Real Housewives of Atlanta. Should Phaedra make sure that her 2 sons see their dad even though he's in prison? We want to hear what you're thinking. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.